that that debate, although it's fun to waste time on LinkedIn and Twitter arguing with one another, none of it matters if you don't understand how you're different, how you can help people, who you need to help, how to create tension in the process, how to have some level of expertise, and how to make sure you can pick yourself up off the floor after you get repeatedly punched in the face, because that's what we do in sales every day.
Everything leads to growth with the National Association for Sales Professionals. The Leads to Growth podcast with the National Association for Sales Professionals provides in-depth discussions sharing the best sales, prospecting, influence, and communication skills, as well as sales training techniques to take your professional sales career to the next level.
Great day, guys. We are here with Jeff Bajorek. Jeff helps salespeople and companies rethink the way they sell so they can sell more effectively without feeling like they need a shower immediately afterwards. He's a Gitmer licensed trainer, an author, a speaker, and always up for an engaging conversation. And that's what we're going to have here right now. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I am so glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I hear this is episode number 1.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We are starting with some fire here with you, my friend.
Oh, I feel bad that you guys couldn't find a better opener. Like this is
we got the Michigan trifecta right here.
I do like that, though. All right, cool. We'll go with that.
Absolutely. I'm here in Austin now, but we got Rick over there in Michigan, you over there as well. And today,
Orlando today, actually.
Oh, very nice.
Orlando, Florida.
Enjoy yourself and have some oranges, right? All right, today we are going to talk about Jeff's new book, The 5 Forgotten Fundamentals of Prospecting. And Jeff, really honestly loving the topic, love the direction. I haven't seen people approach prospecting in the way that you are right now, and really excited about getting into this topic with you. And before we really dig into some of the advice and tips, I would love to know what inspired you to write this book.
Well, I'd love to say that that there was some long held belief and some strategy that I've been poring over and mining for the last 12 years of my sales career. But in reality, this is a project that actually was kind of the genesis of this project started about a year ago when I recorded a webinar for you guys. And I went through and just kind of covered what I thought were some of the essentials for owning your sales process. And as I dug into the prospecting part a little bit, that webinar became the source for an ebook that I put out. And then when I went to put out another ebook, I wanted to start. I really wanted to make a real book, like a 250-page book that you could buy on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble or whatever. And this prospecting chapter was the one that I had fleshed out the most. As I dug in a little bit more and started thinking about those fundamental principles, which is what I teach, it's what I coach on, it's what I speak on, I started to realize that there wasn't anybody talking like this about prospecting. You get into the debates now and they drive me crazy. Cold calling is dead. Social media is the new way. Don't pick up the phone. And I'm thinking, it wasn't that long ago, right? And I've had this business that I've run now for a little over 3 years. I sold in an industry door to door. I was in medical devices for a little over 11 years, and you walk into offices to make calls. You walk into hospitals to make calls. Social media versus the phone, neither one of them were relevant. And what that made me realize was that debate, although it's fun to waste time on LinkedIn and Twitter arguing with one another, none of it matters if you don't understand how you're different, how you can help people, who you need to help, how to create tension in the process, how to have some level of expertise, and how to make sure you can pick yourself up off the floor after you get repeatedly punched in the face, because that's what we do in sales every day. And it just dawned on me, and after talking to a couple of colleagues of mine, they're like, Jeff, hey, look, I haven't seen anybody talk like this about this concept. Go with it, right? And so the more I worked on it, the more I wrote, the more I thought. Christy and I on our podcast, we had a couple of episodes that went into it because we had a month dedicated to prospecting a couple of months ago. And the more it became fleshed out, the more I realized that this isn't just an ebook. It's not just a chapter in a book. It's not just an ebook. I can probably print this thing and really give it the feel, make it palpable. and I'm really proud of the way it came out. It's a little book, right? I mean, I keep telling people that it's a little book. There's a big book, a real book, to come in the future, because I've got a lot of ways that I can go in a lot of different places. But this is it's a work I'm really proud of, and I think at its source, you got to understand those things before you pick up the phone, before you send an email, before you knock on the door. There are those fundamentals that people forget.
I completely agree. And, you can talk about prospecting till the cows come home, right? There's never enough prospecting that you can do. I'm finding, and I'm really looking forward to getting some of these points to find out, really what's not changed. What are the principles that really still stay the same? And also, I liked your little comment about, without having to take a shower afterwards, that old school sales, that old school influence, there was a dirty element to it. And you can't do that anymore. I mean, first off, there's so many rules and regulations out there protecting this from happening. Second of all, I mean, the internet's out there. I mean, anything that you do that comes across sly or shady, so to speak, is going to be put out on the internet. You can't hide anymore from these things. So that whole shady element of influence and sales is kind of gone by the wayside anymore.
Well, I think, what is becoming more and more apparent to people, not just salespeople, but, the people who are buying products, which is everybody, is that sales is a people business. And that, I mean, we can talk about AI on another episode and how everybody's afraid of that. But there are certain things that artificial intelligence will not ever be able to replace, because there are certain things that only people can bring to the equation. And when you realize that sales is a people business, and you realize that the way you treat other people is going to either come back to haunt you or serve you well, you realize that you can't employ those old school tactics for long. I'll defend the used car guy because, back in the day, because now everybody buys used cars on the internet. I don't know anybody who doesn't. Back in the day, he wanted you to drive off that lot because you weren't coming back. Mm-hmm. He had no bridge to burn. It didn't matter. You were gone. You were walking in, you were gone. I wasn't worried about repeat business. So do what you need to do when you need to do it. I get that. I'll defend that stereotype in that manner. But that's not how the world works today. With that said, if you leave everything up to the buyer, then you're abdicating your role as a salesperson, because the buyer doesn't know what they don't know. And that is, that's where the crux of this, discussion comes up. Well, I'm just going to put enough information out there for everybody to go look in all the right places to see all the right things. Hopefully they'll see my stuff. If I put enough stuff out there, then they won't have a choice but to see my stuff. And when you think about how much that leaves to chance, and I got a number to hit this month, I can't leave all that to chance. And then when you figure that the social media networks and the Google and all the search engines, they change their algorithms at the drop of a hat, and they don't owe you the respect to tell you when they're going to do that or what they're going to look like, that just leaves far too much to chance. So prospecting is still something you have to maintain control over. But it's funny, the other side of the, not feeling like you have to take a shower afterward. There are so many people out there who own small businesses, who run businesses, who kind of find themselves accidentally in sales, much like I did, who feel like you have to sell like that used car guy from 30 years ago in order to be effective. I run into it every day. And what I'm able to do, and what I pride myself on being able to do, is work with them and show them what the fundamentals are, how that used car guy applied those fundamentals. But that's not how you have to do it. You do it the way that's comfortable for you. As long as you can know what you need to do it the way you want to, do it the way that makes you feel good about doing it, because that's going to get you to do it more. And nothing happens till a sale is made. So denying the fact that you're in sales is not going to help you get anything done.
Well said. Well said. I like the love you give to the used car salesman. I've not heard that perspective before. That makes a lot of sense. No, it really does.
Empathy is a big part of the game too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
listen, we'll get a follow-up question on that one.
Yeah, man, fire away, Rick.
So how do you see the used car salesman guy who back in the day probably never going to see someone again? There is no email address. Unlikely someone's going to give their home phone number. How does that translate now into you can find everyone on 5 different social medias at the drop or at the click of a button?
So what do you mean by that?
So the energy that I expend as a used car salesman back in the day to get someone to leave the lot with the car, driving it, where do I, that same energy, that same enthusiasm, where do I not put that in today's world where the landscape is totally different?
Well, I mean, I think when it comes to used cars specifically, there's so many people who go shopping for used cars in a different way, right? So, I mean, I think that used car salesman doesn't have as much energy to expend because that job doesn't exist anymore. You know, I think your reputation certainly mattered then, and there would be places that you didn't go. And now there are so many places that, and to that end, I think there were some people who just went in expecting a fight, right? And so if that's your reputation, then, hey, look, I know I got to do it. And then they would procrastinate those kinds of activities. I mean, how many times do you go out and you try to go when the salesperson is busy, or you try to go when you know there's going to be a lot of other people out and there won't be enough help, and you may be able to get some time to yourself? I mean, go buy a new shirt or buy a new suit or something like that, and you're just browsing and there's like 4 or 5 people swarming you, and you don't want that, right? But sometimes you know that you're just going to be swarmed, and you get defensive and you close your body language off and everything, and you just try to make yourself scarce.
That's a great point, Jeff. The fact that people are expecting it too, right?
Yeah.
When it's there, that people expect it, then that's what they get. When you walk in expecting a fight, and you're going to get a fight, and people aren't expecting that anymore, right? A lot of that energy has changed. The push-pull aspect of it has probably changed a lot as well.
I agree. I just think that, you know, as the expectations change, as the economy changes and the way we do business changes, people see different opportunities, they see different options, and they're more likely to take the path of what they feel to be least resistance. Sometimes you just got to go and talk to the person you don't want to talk to, and you know that. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Rick.
No, I think you did. I think you answered it beautiful, and I think it leads us to your first point, your first fundamental here that's been forgotten is really, you know what you bring to the table. You know, you're able to push a lot more. You're able to leverage a lot more when you bring a lot to the table, and you know what that is. Tell us more about that, Jeff.
Well, the one of my biggest arguments in there is that if you cannot differentiate, you cannot sell. So you have to know what differentiates you. You have to know what you bring to the table that nobody else can. And in a world as big as the number one pushback, or the number one way that people push back to that is they say, Jeff, it's a big world. I mean, there could be someone else in the world out there who does. No, there isn't. And not in the way that we're all individual snowflakes falling from the sky, but like know what it is that you do in your space that no one else can do. It's your approach. It's your why. It is. It's not the color of your logo. It's not the logo, or it's not the font style. It's not the design. It's not the website. There is something that your product or service does that is different from everybody else's. And if there isn't a difference, you got to go somewhere where there is, or you got to dig a little bit deeper, because if you cannot differentiate, then you are going to be reduced to competing on price. And if you're competing on price, that is a race to the bottom that I would rather not enter. As a matter of fact, I refuse to enter it.
It's a lost cause.
Well, the only thing worse than winning the race to the bottom is finishing second. Because then what you've done is really devalued yourself, and then not even won for it, as a result. So you really, this part is where a lot of people get stuck, because when it comes to selling, you feel like you got to race out the door every morning. You feel like you've had so many things to do. You have so many calls you have to make. You've got so much responsibility. You're trying to control something. But what that means is that people want to act before they think. And you can't do that. Yeah. This is something you need to sit with. And in workshops and things, I work with people. I sit with people, and I give them 10 minutes to say, okay, what do you bring to the table? Right? How do you differentiate yourself? What makes you different? What makes that valuable? And why does that matter? Those are the 3 questions that people have to answer. And then they get 10 minutes, they sit around, they answer it, and then I open it up. This is why I love the workshop space, is that I ask questions and I demand answers. It's not like a big keynote with 600 people in the audience where you just ask a question and move on. I demand an answer, and then people give me an answer, and then I almost always tell them they're wrong, because they almost always are. And then this discussion happens. And then the other people in the room pipe up, and then they start to learn more from each other than they do from me, which is exactly my job as a facilitator. But this is a thought process that doesn't happen. And until you go through this thought process, you have no idea how to position what it is that your product actually does. I learned this really early on. I took a job. I took my first sales job, drinking from a fire hose. Didn't know which end was up. Was in it about 3 years, and then took the right call at the right time from the right recruiter and got a new gig. I made some assumptions about the value proposition of that company that I moved to. And when I spoke to a customer who I was staying in the same industry, so I had my same customers, and I went back and I said, so yeah, I started this new job. We got this thing. He said, great, Jeff, good luck. And I'm like, hold on a second. And he said, that's great. I know why you took the job. I'm telling you right now, that's not enough for me to change the way I do business. It's not enough for me to buy that product for that reason, because it doesn't do it for me. And at that point, and he eventually became a customer, but at that point I was bringing him something that he perceived no difference with, even though I perceived a tremendous difference. And we had a 25% premium on our product for reasons he didn't care about. It's like, not only is what you're selling really, that's nice, but I don't really care. But now I can't even switch to you just because I like you, because it's going to increase my cost by a prohibitive amount.
Value didn't relate to him. Yeah.
So here I am. This was the first guy I told, and I'm thinking I made one of the worst moves I've ever made. But what I did was I went back to the drawing board. Talk to people about, talk to customers, talk to potential customers, talk to people who said they'd never do business with me. I learned as much as I could from as many people as I could learn from, and eventually went back. That particular former customer, became a good customer of mine again. I tripled my revenue in a cost-constrained industry at a 25% premium in 18 months, because I knew what would move the needle, not what the marketing department was telling me, not what the recruiter told me when I took the job. It was the factor of having gone through that exercise. What is it that we really do differently, and how do I position that? And who's going to respond to that?
I love it. No, I really do love it. And two pieces that I want to point out there is one is the vulnerability, right? The vulnerability to really explore everything and to take a look at it, because sometimes you start unpeeling that onion and you're like, you don't like what you see under there, and you're forced to make some serious decisions. I've been there before where I really had to look at the career that I was at and I say, you know what? I might have to move on here, because I just didn't have the belief or the buy-in, or the differentiators weren't enough value for me to really get behind. And but when you do open and unpeel that onion, it gives you the opportunity to buy in and choose those beliefs. And when you really realize that you believe and buy into a product, you can really get behind it. And I love that. You have to know what you bring to the table you have to know your own value and the value you bring in order to be able to deliver that value to somebody else. And that's a core principle that we teach, and I love that. I'd love to go to the next point here. I think they lead in so beautifully together. Once you know your value and see your own value, and you understand what you're bringing to the table, know who you should be talking to. And there's a couple different levels with this, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
Well, I got this quote from Seth Godin a couple of years ago. It says, "Sell nuts to squirrels." What's that?
Decent person to follow.
Yeah, he's given me more than a few gems over the years, but he says, listen, sell nuts to squirrels. Stop trying to convince dolphins that nuts are delicious. Right? It's a very simple concept that most people don't totally recognize. And, squirrels and dolphins, completely different ends of the spectrum, right? In a lot of different ways. I'm sure there's some really smart person out there who's going to tell me that they're evolutionarily linked somewhere. That's not the discussion I'm here to get into, but
smarter than us, yes.
Yes, these are different animals, right? But your product, just because you love it, doesn't mean that everybody else loves it. So when you think about why you are different, and this is very important to come out of, it's very important to come out of that first step with that new perspective of why you're different and what you bring to the table, because it's not just the customer archetype or the avatar that the marketing department or the founder of the company came up with. It's now with that deeper understanding. If you're a sales rep carrying a bag, if you have a deeper understanding of what makes you different, and even you, the sales rep carrying that product, is different from your cohort, your contemporary across the state, across the town, across the street, I don't care, and what they do with it to bring something unique to the table, who is going to respond to that? And stop thinking in terms of your product. start thinking in terms of the way you deliver the product, in terms of the way you service the product. And that additional layer of information, or removing that additional layer, to use your onion analogy, is going to give you much better perspective into not only who will respond, but how they will respond, which will allow you to tailor your approach a little bit. So everything I do, and I tell people, I challenge people to rethink the way they sell. The key portion of that is think. And so much action is taking place without thought first. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make any sense. But you got, meathead sales guy saying, I'm going to make 80 calls today before lunch, and I eat the same thing for breakfast every day because it gives me 6 more seconds to make calls because I don't have to spend 6 seconds making a decision on what to eat. Like, it just, that is that's an avatar that is overused, overplayed, and your hustle is overrated if you're not putting it in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Stephen Covey said, before you climb the ladder to success, make sure it's leaning against the right wall. Mm-hmm. Right? Was it Abraham Lincoln said, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'm going to spend the first 4 sharpening my axe.
Sharpening the axe. Absolutely.
It's like, let's think about what we need to do so we can go and be surgically precise with how we do it. And that's what all of these fundamentals are meant to inspire people to do in terms of their thought process. But it's not enough to say, I sell orthopedic implants, I'm going to sell to orthopedic surgeons.
No.
Okay. I did that for a long time, and I didn't have something for every orthopedic surgeon. I had a lot of different things for a lot of different orthopedic surgeons, but very rarely were they the same things for the same surgeons. And even beyond that, there were some surgeons who had very close relationships with other companies, competitors of mine, that I was never going to be able to break. I knew why they bought, and I was never going to be able to deliver that. Mm-hmm. So even though they fit the perfect customer profile in terms of any objective measure, I knew that wasn't my customer. I knew I didn't need to call on them. And so when you know who you don't need to call on, you can focus more effort on who you do need to call on, and that's going to increase your effectiveness.
Beautifully said.
Thanks.
Beautifully said. Yeah, absolutely. Now, and one of the, I love the aspect of qualifying. First off, I think far too many of us, we're thinking all the time while we're in the conversation with the prospect, but we didn't think to get us there, right? That when we're proactive, we're usually reactive in the sales world, right? We're like, I'm calling the numbers that are put in front of me. When I get on the phone, I'll figure out what I got to say when I get on there. Nobody gets themselves in the right state of mind. Nobody really visualizes and does all the little steps. And then also what you say is, know who you should be talking to. You're really framing your own mind, right? Too, of who the client is and having one direction to talk to. So I like how your points allow you to take a certain frame and a certain thought and a proactive way to think, so that when you go in there, you're ready to deal and hammer the nails that come to you. Yeah. I mean, a little bit about the qualifying aspect. That's something curious to me. So how do you qualify who you should be talking to? I mean, and because everybody's got to look out there, and a lot of people out there have people prospecting and generating leads for them, right? And a lot of people are out there doing the exact opposite. Like, everything is on my shoulders. I got to prospect, I got to generate the leads, I got to market to them, I got to do everything. How do you qualify the people to know who you should be talking to?
Oof. So my stance on qualification is a little different than a lot of people. I'm not alone, but I'm a little different than a lot of people. I don't waste a lot of time worrying about who, about whether or not this person is worth talking to. I think some of it, maybe it's unfair, because I think over the 14 years that I've been doing this, that I've developed some instincts, if you will, where a gut feeling from me now is worth a little bit more than a gut feeling was 10 years ago. And so I think I'm intuitively in different positions than some other people are. So I want to get that asterisk and disclaimer out of the way to begin with. But I will talk to almost anybody, because if you are not the decision maker, you probably know who the decision maker is, and you can help me. But I'm not one of those people, because sales is a people business. I'm not one of those people that says, well, you're not worth my time. Can you get your daddy on the phone so I can talk to you? Listen, everybody in the organization is a VIP. Everybody if you don't, and I learned this selling in operating rooms, because, I'd see a lot of my competitors would ignore the nurses in the rooms. They'd ignore the first assistants. They'd ignore the anesthesiologist. Guess what? I was in the lounge with those people who were talking smack on my competitors because they weren't given their due. They weren't given any respect in the theater that we were all working together in. Every team member has a value. There's a reason they're there. And, I just believe in treating people with respect. So I'm not going to ignore somebody. And a lot of times, the more respect you pay to everybody along the way, they know what's going on. They're going to tell you who to go talk to. In some cases, they'll walk you down the hall and introduce them. But the guy or the gal who shows up and says, "Hi, you're not very important, but I need to talk to the person who is important. So can you just put me through directly to them?" That's not how you treat people. And that's also a very ineffective way to try to get something done. So from a qualification standpoint, at least in terms of the traditional way that it's viewed, I take kind of a contrarian opinion.
I think what you're saying is that you treat everybody congruently, that you know who you should be talking to, but you bring the same level of intent and respect all the way up the ladder till you get to your decision maker. And I think that's a huge piece. I don't know if you guys have. I know who I'm talking to. You guys have all experienced this. You've been to a networking event, right, where you end up in a short conversation with somebody, and they're not who you are not who they wanted to talk to. Yeah. And they're like, "Here's the business card. I'll talk to you later." Like,
right.
wait, I thought we were having a good conversation here. Like, it's funny, but you can feel that. You're 100% right.
And people are intuitively meant to be connected. And I think that works for us. I think it works against us too, because if we go back to why are you different, it's kind of goes against the grain to think about being different, because we all want to fit in, right? Mm-hmm. So there's something contrarian to that too. But people are intuitively meant to be connected, so don't fight that. And listen, okay, can we stop pretending that we all spend 9 hours a day only in front of the VIPs that we need to talk to? Like, tell me you don't. Tell me you.
I only talk to C-level. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, and I do so with every minute on my calendar is full. Like, give me a break. You don't need to talk to that many people. So you have time to lay the groundwork to have someone else introduce you, to lay the groundwork to have someone else give you a referral. And now think about it this way: we're in a gig economy. We're in it's a great time to start and own and run a small business or be a part of a small business. And everybody's got friends who are doing something else. Everybody knows somebody. Don't pretend that they don't.
That's the truth.
Too important for them.
Come on down here in Austin, man. It's crazy. You sit down at a bar or a restaurant, you're next to the guy with the tank top and shorts and a flip-flop, and he's the founder of this, and the founder of that is next to you. It's amazing how quickly you realize that that you don't take anything for granted, and you have every conversation with the same rapport and respect. The next point, I'm going to move.
I was add something quick to that. 6 degrees of separation in the world. How many degrees of separation is it in the small kind of elite business community in the United States alone, in one city?
Yeah, it's not 6.
it's not 6 at all. Absolutely.
And it's not more than 6.
No, that's for sure. I think we're in the 3 degrees somewhere. Somehow we roll. This is my boy Ricky T's favorite one here. I've seen him execute these prospecting principles in his dating life, so that's why I say it's his favorite. So tell me about create some tension.
Oh,
this is a fun one.
Well, tension is a stimulus, right? And so when you go back, there has to be some sort of stimulus in order to get any kind of response. That's physics. That's the way this works. But the classically trained salesperson was all about finding pain. The classically trained salesperson then, and you go back and you read some of those old books, you read some of those old manuals, and the principles are phenomenal and the intention is phenomenal. But what you find is that shortcut after shortcut after shortcut, a lot of people will take those old principles that have been handed down to them through 3 generations and have essentially been bastardized into make people as uncomfortable as possible so that they will give you their money and go away. I don't like that. I think it's clear by now that that's not how I operate. But what I've also noticed is that people don't just buy things because they're in pain. People don't buy Bentleys and Teslas and Rolex watches because they're in pain. Okay? They are trying to seek something. They're trying to seek an outcome. And there is only, they're seeking the outcome that only a Rolex can provide, that only a Bentley can provide, that only something, so maybe that's a little extreme. I don't know how many people listening to this right now sell Bentleys or Rolex watches, but at that extreme of the spectrum, you've got a precedent that's being set. So not everybody buys because they're hurting or they're trying to fill a hole or a gap or something like that, especially in the business to business space. Businesses are trying to achieve outcomes. You, by being different, can help them achieve an outcome that only you can help them achieve. So what you need to do is create an awareness of the space between where they are right now and where you can help them get. Mm-hmm. And that awareness is tension. And when you know it, we're all sales professionals on this call. When you plant a seed of, hey, do you ever think about this? Mm-hmm. Oh man. And then you water that seed and you fertilize that seed, mm-hmm. and you watch it start to sprout and start to grow until it becomes something that really needs to be paid attention to, kind of like some of the weeds that are in my backyard right now. I need to pay some more attention to them. But you create that tension. Now here's one of the things, and I have to give Christy Walters, my partner on the podcast, a ton of credit for this, because she said, you know what, Jeff, you cannot have tension without connection. And I think that rounds out everything else. Mm-hmm. It jibes with my philosophy as well as flies in the face of that old used car stereotype. Absolutely. That guy could needle you and he could bait you into doing things and he could goad you into doing things. And if you walked off whatever, he was going to throw the whole book at you. Mm-hmm. We're in a connected economy now to where if you have a relationship, you can create a little bit of tension. But if there's no connection between you and your prospect, you can't create any tension. If you can't create tension, you can't sell.
Beautifully said.
So hold on 1 second. So tension is stimulus, and stimulus leads to response. Love that. And tension is the gap between where you are right now and where you're telling me you want to go. And you can't have tension without connection.
Correct.
No, yes. that rapport is essential, right? Otherwise, as we talked before, that tension will snap. Right? If you don't have the rapport or the connection at the beginning, you can't walk into those uncomfortable waters with that person. You can't lead them into the uncertainty unless you've already given them that rapport and certainty from the very beginning, which is brilliant. Really brilliant.
If you think of two hands holding on to a string, right? That's the connection. That string represents the connection. Or maybe it's a rubber band. Maybe it's something with a little bit of stretch to it. When those two hands pull apart, you create that tension. And I did, just as you were speaking there about rapport is how tightly each hand is holding on to their respective ends of that band, right? The more rapport you have, the more you can stretch. And I don't mean disrespect. I don't mean I don't mean being offensive.
Oh, you got to come from an equal posture. You have to be an equal posture.
Yeah, and so it's not a power struggle. The tension is not a power struggle. The tension is just like, look, I know we have this connection, and when we can put a little tension on this connection, that's how we grow, and that's how human beings grow. When you go through any kind of self-improvement exercise, that there's something gnawing.
It's talking about the gap. Right? It's talking about the gap that's uncomfortable to talk about, and that's and the person who's going to support you to get through that gap. And I think that's the big piece. Like, hey, we've developed rapport. Here's the gap. Let's talk about it. But I'm going to support you to get across that gap. Love that. Really love that. And that leads us right to the next piece. Is you have to show yourself as the expert if that person is going to trust you to take them across that gap. Mm-hmm. And that expert piece, tell us a little bit about that, and specifically how you can show yourself as the expert without being the arrogant, aloof guy. Like, listen, you don't know anything, without being that guy, we'll call him. How do you still show yourself as the expert?
Well, if rapport is how tightly each hand is holding onto that side of the band, your expertise helps to build your rapport. If I'm a salesperson and I'm brand new and I'm talking to someone who I don't know, and they don't know me from anybody else, and they don't know that I have that what I have to talk about is worth listening to, then I've got no perceived expertise. Mm-hmm. And if I've got no perceived expertise, they've got no reason to listen to me. If they got no reason to listen to me, there's no connection, there's no tension, there's no sale. Okay, so that's how that kind of breaks down in mm-hmm. that regard. But if you want to create change, if you want to present options and outcomes to your prospects that no one else can deliver, you have to have some sort of a reputation that you have created outcomes like that in the past, or at least demonstrate the ability to create those outcomes. And you can do that in a variety of ways. You can have a podcast, you can write a blog, you can have a video channel, you can speak for a living. Podcasts are like the new speaking engagements, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
you're utilizing technology to get that message to many more people on with a very long tail, because these podcasts last as long as Libsyn or whoever's hosting your podcast will be around, right? And they're going to be around for a while. And if they're not around, there's someone's going to take all this data and do something with it. So, that lasts way longer than a keynote speech from 50 years ago. Someone sitting in the back of the room. You can go back, you can review, you can take notes, things like that. So the content is, I've always approached the internet, social media, and my blog and all the content that I create is something that's going to last forever. I'm not so concerned with getting stuff in front of people as much as I'm concerned with putting something out there to where when people look for me, they're going to find something I'm proud of. So I create a lot of it. I put it out there. I should probably, quite frankly, be a little more proactive about my distribution.
This isn't probably, oh man, come on, we're not doing that. No, but I love that theme that you came back to again. It's the congruency. Like, we were talking before the call about all the podcasts and the blog posts and all these different things that you can do. And you're like, why am I doing all these things? But I think a lot of it comes down to that congruency. When I sit down in that table conversation with somebody and express myself, or you sit down in that conversation, you express yourself as an expert. And then they go back to confirm. They see all the podcasts, they see the blog posts, they see everything confirms that you are that expert, and it's congruent, and that reassures people through that sales process, which I really like. And I want to move on to the next one here, because I can't wait to hear what you talk about and keep your swagger, man. That last one, Rick, that's a little bit mine right there. If yours is number 3, mine's number 5 for sure. So tell us about the swagger a little bit, man. Yeah, I got one more fun question for you after that. But tell us about the swagger a little bit.
So attitude's everything.
Yeah.
Right. Amen. And selling is a profession. It's a craft. It's an art. It's a science. It's all those things. But it is an activity that we engage in that if you fail only 2 out of 3 times, you're doing really well. And I do not care how good you are at what you do. I don't care how successful you've been in the past. When you knock on 3 doors, 2 of them are going to be closed right in your face. And in order to be the best that you can be, you've got to get your mind right first. And swagger is this, it's this term that just kind of stuck out to me. And it reminds me of a rock star, right? I mean, if your favorite rock star, I don't care who it is, they go out there and they own it. There is this
Jagger's
persona.
got that swagger, man.
Yes, and there's this persona that they step into in order to go and perform. And every sales call you make is a performance. And when you start looking at it as a performance, and then you start thinking about putting your best foot forward. And in order to put your best foot forward, your mind has to be in the right place. And so that's why it's helpful to listen to your favorite song as loud as you possibly can in your headphones or in your car before you go into that big meeting. It gets you ready. Your endorphins rush and the serotonin wash and everything that comes in mentally. It's why, I believe it's Amy Cuddy gave a TED Talk a few years ago about the superhero pose before the big.
Oh yeah, I use that Wonder Woman pose, man.
It's
powerful.
There's something about it. Acting as if is very, very powerful. So if you walk around like a superhero, you're going to feel like a superhero. My mom used to tell me this as a kid. She said, I played a lot of baseball. She said, if you want to be a ball player, you got to look like a ball player. If you look like a ball player, you're going to feel like a ball player. If you feel like a ball player, you'll be a ball player, or something to that effect. Sorry, Mom, if I got it wrong. But it's funny, and you can disagree with me, but for Father's Day, my kids gave me a Superman t-shirt. That t-shirt means the world to me because it reflects how they feel about me. And that's why I do this. But you mean to tell me that every time I put that t-shirt on, I don't remember who gave that to me and why? That changes who I am in that moment. Yes, it changes who I am in that moment. And if I'm going to channel some, a rock star, then I'm going to feel a little bit like a rock star.
Absolutely, man. I love that. Modeling.
Yes.
How to model something. And honestly, keep that swagger. Should we start with that swagger as far as I'm concerned? We talk about get in state to create. Anytime we take a call, anytime we get on a podcast, anytime we do anything, we got to get in that state, model that person, puff that chest out, do a little Mick Jagger dance if we got to, whatever gets the flavor flowing. But I really love that one. And I really love all these. I think there's a lot of tie together, and I think they also work as much for who you are as much as who you're selling and what you're doing out there. Thank you a lot for your time, Jeff. I really appreciate your energy, and I think you got a great message here for a lot of people. And prospecting is not going away.
No.
Not going away at all. And this has really been a lot of amazing stuff. And I want to close with a fun little question here. You got that smirk on your face. You might already know.
I might know where this is going.
So sales and influence. We're Rick and I. We talk about sales and influence all the time. As I mentioned, Rick, sales and influence comes up in dating, right? It comes up in used cars and purchases in our own personal life. Sales and influence is really everywhere that we go and in everything that we do. And so I would love to hear a story of when you used all your sales, prospecting, and influence skills outside of business. And how did you reach your outcome? How did it turn out for you?
Yeah, okay. I've got a couple of stories. I'm going to preface the story. I'll make it brief because I know we're running short on time. But I'm the same person in business as I am out of business. And it's not to take the cynical view that life is business or anything, but I really believe that selling and life are so closely intertwined that it doesn't make sense to try to separate them. The way you interact with people, the way you respect people, the way you talk to people, every day I try to make someone's day. And I don't just check the box and then I'm done for the day. But it's, if I'm out to lunch, if I'm out to dinner, my wife calls me the biggest flirt in the world. I'm just trying to make somebody laugh. When I go, when I was in college, I waited tables. It was a great job. I will wait tables again. I had a great time doing it. But I was always looking for someone to interact with me. And I had more tables and more customers and more guests, if you will, who just didn't really care to acknowledge me, didn't care to interact. And it used to drive me nuts because I love talking to people. So I try to do that constantly. There's a baseball game coming up here in Metro Detroit, up at Jimmy John's Field, up in I forget the name of the league, but there's 4 teams that play out of that place, and they sell suites. And my brother lives in New Jersey, so he and his family are coming in, and the family tries to get together about once a month. And I said, why don't we go to the baseball game? Why don't we go to a suite? It's not Major League Baseball. This is affordable, right? We can get a suite. We'll have food. We'll just do dinner out there. It'll be fun. And so we're all together at dinner, and I get on speakerphone with the guy, the vice president of sales for this baseball league in this stadium, and I'm just talking. I'm just having fun. And my family is absolutely rolling in the background because they cannot believe that I'm talking to this person the way I am. I'm using his name without even realizing that I'm using his name. And I'm just kind of confirming what he's saying. And I'm always asking for something else. And I mean, I paid list price for the suite. Like, I didn't take advantage of anybody. I just asked them what we could do. There was an offer. I didn't pay list price because there was an offer that expired at the end of June. And I said, hey, can you make that work for August 5th? Yeah, we can make that work. I'm just loving interacting. And meanwhile, my family's like, I can't believe I'm hearing what I'm hearing. I would never talk like that. And I get done and I'm like, guys, that was me buying something. I wasn't even selling anything. That was me buying something. And I just had to laugh. And it just kind of, for me, there's a little bit of perspective there in terms of what you can accomplish and how many people you can make laugh if you're just willing to engage with the other person on the other end of the line with you, or the other person who's bringing you food, for crying out loud. Like, what can become possible there? And then what happens? What's the ripple effect of the other people around you? And how can you impact their day? How can you impact their life? There's we underestimate our power sometimes. And it's like that. There've been a couple of commercials out there for insurance companies. I don't remember which one. But you hear that, someone sees a good deed done and they do another good deed. Someone laughs and someone else laughs. Someone's having a great time and it makes someone else think about a great time. It's the line at Starbucks where 155 people buy the drink for the person right behind them, only because the person in front of them bought them a drink. Like, it's just that kind of stuff is contagious. So I don't know if that answers your question.
You know what? It's
a beautiful answer anyway.
It's a beautiful answer. And we are influencing at all times, even when we're not thinking about it, just in our daily lives. And I love that. The influencing starts here first. You can influence yourself to be who you want to be, trust and know that you come with value, right? And then just forget what everybody else cares about, because it doesn't matter, because you are true to who yourself is and who you really want to be. All right, Jeff, great stuff, buddy. Really appreciate the time. Tell us more. Tell our audience, actually, how can our audience continue to learn from you?
It's pretty simple. JeffBajorek.com, JeffBajorek.com. That's kind of the hub. That's my hub on the internet. So my home base, so to speak. So everything that you want to hear from me is housed there. I've got a podcast. So anybody listening to this is familiar with the term podcast. They know what it is. Mine is called The Why and the Buy. And I do that with a friend of mine, Christy Walters. I'm up in Detroit. She's down in Atlanta, and we're just having a blast doing it. We really help salespeople and small business owners get through the struggle and the challenges, help them keep their swagger. We give them some of our life and business experience along the way. And actually, you can buy my book on my website. It's available for free. You can download it for free on the website. Please download it, read it, learn from it, ask me questions. When you download it, you will get the worksheet that comes along that helps you fill out the answers to those questions that we talked about earlier. And if you're one of those touchy-feely kind of people who wants to hold the book in their hands, I will sign a copy and send it to you. And you can buy one of those right on the website as well.
My man.
Beautiful.
Awesome starting off our first podcast with a brother from the D. Good stuff, man.
Proud to represent. Love this
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, man. Have a great day, guys. We'll see you all very soon. That's our Leads to Growth podcast, NASP.